48 hours after my mother secretly added my sister to the $150,000 savings account I had spent 11 years building, I emptied every dollar. Not because I was angry, not because I wanted revenge, because I finally understood something I had spent my entire life refusing to accept. My family didn't think my money belonged to me. They thought it belonged to whoever they decided deserved it. And when my mother called me 2 days later and casually asked, "So, when is Emily getting her half?" I smiled, because by then there was nothing left for Emily to take. My name is Sarah Jenkins. I'm 32 years old, and for most of my life, I was the responsible daughter, the dependable one, the one who didn't need reminding, the one who was supposed to understand. When I was 17, my father lost his job. When I was 21, my parents divorced. When I was 24, my mother moved into a smaller house because she couldn't afford the mortgage on the old one. And through every one of those disasters, I was there. I worked, I saved, I showed up. I didn't ask my family for money. I didn't borrow from them. I didn't expect anyone to rescue me. But apparently, that was my first mistake. Because somewhere along the way, my family stopped seeing my independence as something admirable. They started seeing it as something they could exploit. My younger sister Emily was 27. Emily had always been different from me. Growing up, she was charming, funny, social. The kind of person who could walk into a room where nobody knew her and leave 20 minutes later with 3 new friends. Teachers loved her. Neighbors loved her. Relatives adored her. And my mother? My mother treated Emily like she was made of glass. If Emily forgot her homework, there was an excuse. If Emily missed a payment, someone helped. If Emily quit a job, Mom called it finding herself. If I made a mistake, Mom called it poor judgment. There was a difference. A very obvious one, and I felt it long before I had the words to describe it. When I was 19, I worked 2 jobs while attending community college. I would leave my morning shift at a grocery store, go straight to campus, and then work evenings at a restaurant. Some nights, I'd get home after midnight. I'd eat cereal because I was too exhausted to cook. Then I'd fall asleep with my backpack still on the floor beside me. Emily, meanwhile, was taking a year off. My mother called it giving her space to figure out her future. Nobody gave me space. I was expected to figure mine out immediately. I remember one night especially. I was sitting at the kitchen table calculating how much I needed to save for tuition. My fingers were cramped from carrying trays all night. Mom walked into the kitchen. She looked at my notebook. Then she said, "You know, Sarah, you're making life harder than it has to be." I looked up. "What do you mean?" "You're always worrying about money." I laughed. Not because it was funny, because I genuinely didn't know what else to do. Because I don't have any. She shrugged. "You're young. You don't need to be so obsessed with saving." Then Emily came downstairs. She was wearing a new jacket. I knew that jacket cost almost $200 because I had seen the receipt on the counter earlier. Mom smiled at her. "Doesn't that look beautiful on you?" Emily spun around. "Dad's old credit card still works." Mom laughed. I looked back down at my notebook. That was the first time I remember thinking, maybe we're not living by the same rules. Over the years, that thought became harder to ignore. I built my savings slowly, painfully slowly. At 22, I opened a savings account. At first, there was barely anything in it. A few $100s, then 1,000, then 5,000. I kept going. I stopped ordering takeout. I bought used furniture. I drove an old car. I took vacations by staying with friends. Every time I got a raise, I increased the automatic transfer. Every birthday, I put part of whatever money I received into savings. Every tax refund went in. Every bonus. Every extra dollar. I wasn't trying to become rich. I wanted security. That was all. I wanted the freedom to wake up one morning and know that if something went wrong, I wouldn't have to call my mother. I wanted to buy a home someday. A small one. Nothing fancy. A place with a little backyard, a quiet street, and a kitchen that belonged to me. By the time I was 32, that account had reached $150,000. I still remember the exact moment I saw the balance. I was sitting in my car outside a coffee shop. I opened my banking app. $150,000.84. I stared at it. Then I started laughing. I actually cried. I had spent 11 years getting there. 11 years of saying no. 11 years of working late. 11 years of watching other people spend money while I kept putting mine away. And for the first time, I felt like maybe I had actually done something for myself. I took a screenshot. I didn't post it. I didn't tell friends. I didn't celebrate publicly. I sent it to my mother. She responded with 3 words. "That's nice, sweetheart." That's it. No congratulations. No pride. Nothing. A few minutes later, she sent another message. "Emily is having a difficult month." I should have known. I really should have. Emily had moved into an apartment with her boyfriend, Mark. They had expensive tastes and inconsistent incomes. Emily had quit her latest job 3 months earlier because, according to Mom, the environment was toxic. Mark worked construction but had been out for several weeks with an injury. Their rent was behind. Their credit cards were nearly maxed out. And they had recently bought a new television. When Mom told me they were struggling, I said the same thing I had always said. "I'm sorry to hear that." She waited. Then, "Could you help them a little?" I knew what she meant. I said, "I can't." She didn't respond for almost an hour. Then, "You have plenty saved." That sentence bothered me more than I expected. You have plenty saved. Not you worked hard. Not I'm proud of you. Not you must feel relieved. Just, you have plenty. As though $150,000 had appeared magically. As though the number represented excess rather than 11 years of sacrifice. I didn't answer. Mom called me that evening. I let it ring. She called again. I answered. "Sarah." "Hi, Mom. You know I don't ask you for much." I almost laughed. "Mom, you've asked me for money several times. Not for myself." "It's still money." She sighed. "Emily is your sister." "I know. She needs help." "I've already helped." "You gave her $800 last year." "Yes." "And $2,000 the year before." "Yes." "So what's another few thousand?" I looked at my laptop. I had a spreadsheet open. Mortgage projections, closing costs, property taxes, emergency reserves, my future. I said quietly, "Because I don't want to keep funding her lifestyle." Mom's voice changed. "You think you're better than her?" "No." "You've always thought you're better than her." "That's not true." "You're acting like you're the only one who works hard." "I never said that." "You don't have to." Silence. Then she said something that stayed with me. "You're going to regret being selfish when your family needs you." I didn't know it then, but that was a warning. Not an emotional one. A literal one. 3 weeks later, I received an email from my bank. The subject line was, "Important update regarding your account." I almost deleted it. Then I opened it. There was an unfamiliar phrase in the email. "Authorized joint owner." I froze. I read it again. Then again. My stomach tightened. I opened the banking app. I logged in. I went to account details. And there it was. Under authorized account holders, Sarah Jenkins, and underneath it, Emily Jenkins, my sister. For several seconds, I couldn't breathe. I checked the balance, $150,000.84. Still there. I thought maybe it was a technical error. Maybe Emily had been added as a beneficiary. Maybe I misunderstood. So I called the bank. After 20 minutes on hold, a representative answered. I gave her my information. She verified my identity. Then I asked the question. Can you tell me why another person has been added to my savings account? There was a pause. Are you referring to Emily Jenkins? Yes. Okay, one moment. Keyboard sounds. Then, it appears she was added as a joint owner yesterday. My mouth went dry. By whom? The representative hesitated. An existing authorized user. I stared at the wall. Who? Your mother. I didn't say anything. The representative continued. Your mother had account access under the authorization established several years ago. I suddenly remembered. When I was 21, my mother had helped me set up the account because I was living in another city. She had been added as an authorized representative in case I needed help managing the account. I'd forgotten about it. I'd never imagined she would use it against me. Can she withdraw the money? The representative paused. As a joint owner, Ms. Jenkins may have withdrawal authority. My hands started shaking. What about my sister? She may also have access depending on the account configuration. How do I remove them? The representative's tone became careful. Because the account is currently jointly owned, we would need to verify your instructions and review the account structure. I closed my eyes. What do I do? She explained my options. I barely heard half of them. All I could think was, my mother did this. Not Emily. Mom. Mom had taken an account I had spent 11 years building and decided that my sister belonged on it. She had not asked me. She had not called. She had not warned me. She simply decided. I hung up. Then I called my mother. She answered on the second ring. Hi, sweetheart. My voice was strangely calm. Why is Emily on my savings account? Silence. Then, oh. Just that. Oh. I gripped my phone. Mom. Well, we were going to talk to you. We? Emily and me? Why is she on my account? She needs access to emergency money. You mean my money? Mom sighed. Sarah, don't make this dramatic. I almost laughed. Mom, you added another adult to my $150,000 savings account without asking me. Because you weren't listening. I told you I wasn't giving Emily money. She doesn't need all of it. All of what? Sarah, how much were you planning to take? We weren't planning to take anything. I said nothing. She continued. It was just so Emily would have security. I stared at the ceiling. Security? Yes. Her security. Our family's security. There it was. That word. Family. The word they used whenever they wanted something from me. I said, remove her. Mom became defensive. I can't just do that. You added her. Because you weren't cooperating. You had no right. She is your sister. That doesn't give her ownership of my money. Mom's voice hardened. You've become very cold. I swallowed. No, I've become very clear. She hung up. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat on the edge of my bed in the dark. My phone was beside me. I kept checking the account. Still $150,000. Still there. But it didn't feel like mine anymore. It felt like someone had walked into my house and changed the locks while I was sleeping. At 2:13 in the morning, I received a text from Emily. Mom says you're upset. I stared at it. Then another message appeared. You don't have to be weird about this. I felt something inside me go completely still. I typed, you were added to my personal savings account without my permission. Her response came almost immediately. It's not like I'm taking all of it. I stared at those words. Not I didn't know. Not, I'm sorry. Not Mom shouldn't have done that. Just, it's not like I'm taking all of it. I wrote, you shouldn't have access to any of it. 3 dots appeared, then disappeared, then appeared again. Finally, honestly, Sarah, after everything you've done for yourself, I think you can spare some. I put my phone down. That sentence broke something in me, not because of the money, because of what it revealed. They didn't see my savings as the result of sacrifice. They saw it as something I had selfishly kept from them. I didn't cry. I didn't call mom. I didn't confront Emily. I opened my laptop, and I started researching. By morning, I knew exactly what I was going to do. I just didn't know how far I was willing to go. Yet. At 7:06 the next morning, I called the bank again. This time, I asked for the fraud and account security department. I explained everything. I told them my mother had used her old authorization to add my sister as a joint owner without my consent. The representative asked me several questions. Had I signed anything? No. Had I approved the change? No. Did I know my mother still had account access? No. Did I want the account frozen? I hesitated, then said yes. There was one problem. Because of the way the account had been structured, the bank couldn't simply erase what had happened. I needed to go through the appropriate review process. They advised me to document everything. So I did. I saved every text, every email, every notification, every screenshot. I created a folder on my computer. I named it Account Records. Then I created a second folder. Family. That one contained years of messages, requests for money, excuses, apologies, promises, receipts. I started seeing a pattern I had been too emotionally exhausted to notice before. Emily had never considered my boundaries real. Neither had Mom. They only considered my boundaries temporary obstacles. Something to pressure me through. Something to guilt me out of. Something to ignore until I gave in. At 9 that morning, Mom called. I didn't answer. She called again, then sent, "We need to talk." I replied, "Not until you explain why you added Emily to my account." She called immediately. I answered. "What?" Her voice was cold. "I think you're overreacting." "I don't. You're acting like we stole something. You gave my sister access to $150,000. It's family money." "No. Sarah, my savings are not family money." "You're going to regret talking to your mother like this." I laughed quietly. "Mom, you gave someone access to my bank account without asking me. I'm not worried about hurting your feelings right now." She went silent. Then, "Emily is desperate. That's not my responsibility. She could lose her apartment. Then she needs to deal with that. You'd let your own sister become homeless?" I closed my eyes. There it was. The trap. Make me responsible for her consequences. I said, "Mom, if Emily can't afford her apartment, she needs a cheaper apartment. She shouldn't have to start over." I started over. "You're different." "No." My voice cracked. "I'm just tired." Silence. Then she said, "Fine." I knew that tone. "Fine what?" "If that's how you feel, we'll handle it ourselves." The call ended. I sat there for several minutes. Then I noticed something. The account balance had changed. $150,084. Now it was $149,998.84. $2 had been withdrawn. I stared at the screen. My heart started pounding. $2. It was nothing. But it was everything. They were testing the account, testing whether they could move money. I called the bank. The representative confirmed a small transaction had occurred. I asked who initiated it. They couldn't provide every detail immediately, but they confirmed it was associated with the newly added joint owner, Emily. I felt a strange calm settle over me. She had done it. She had actually touched the account. Not for $2. For proof. Proof that the door was open. I opened my laptop again and began looking for a lawyer. Not because I wanted to sue my family. I didn't. I wanted to protect myself. I needed someone who understood financial ownership, family disputes, and trusts. I found an attorney named Daniel Harper. He agreed to a consultation that afternoon. I brought every document. When I explained what happened, he listened without interrupting. Finally, he said, "First, don't move anything until we understand the legal structure of your account and what restrictions apply." I nodded. "I want the money protected." "That's reasonable. Can my family legally take it?" "Not automatically, but the exact answer depends on how the account was established, what your mother was authorized to do, and what ownership rights were actually granted." I handed him the account documents. He reviewed them, then looked at me. "This isn't as simple as your mother adding your sister to a spreadsheet." "I know. She made a significant change to the ownership structure." "So what do I do?" He leaned back. "First, we establish exactly what happened. And then? If the funds are legally yours and you have the authority to withdraw them, we can discuss moving them into an account or structure under your sole control." I nodded. He continued, "But don't create a structure just to frustrate a legitimate creditor or evade an existing legal obligation." "I don't have any creditors." "Good." He explained that a properly established holding structure or trust could provide separation between my personal finances and family drama, but it had to be done legitimately. I listened carefully. For the first time in 2 days, I felt like I could breathe. I wasn't planning revenge. I was planning security. There was a difference. That evening, Emily called. I didn't answer. She called 3 more times. Finally, she texted, "Can we please stop fighting?" I replied, "I'm not fighting with you. I'm protecting my money." She responded, "You're making Mom cry." I stared at the message. Then, "Mom made this decision." "Emily, because you wouldn't help me?" "Me. That's not your money." "Emily, it could be." That sentence stopped me. I read it twice. Then I called Daniel. I told him exactly what she'd written. He paused. "Save that message." "I already did." "Good." That night, Mom showed up at my apartment. I wasn't expecting her. When I opened the door, she was standing there with a handbag over her shoulder. She looked tired. For a second, I saw the mother I remembered, the woman who used to hold my hand crossing the street. Then she said, "We need to fix this." I stepped outside and closed the door behind me. "There's nothing to fix. Sarah, you had no right." I was trying to protect Emily. By giving her access to my savings? She wasn't going to take everything. I stared at her. "You keep saying that." "Because it's true." "Then why did she withdraw $2? Mom blinked. "I didn't know about that." "Did you know she was going to?" "No." I watched her face. She looked genuinely surprised, but I didn't know whether I believed her. Mom lowered her voice. "Emily is scared. So am I." "You don't have anything to be scared of?" I laughed. "That's easy for you to say. You have $150,000. I looked directly into her eyes. "No." She frowned. "What?" "I had $150,000. She went quiet. "I don't know what I have anymore." That was the first time I saw something change in her expression. Fear. Just for a second. Then anger replaced it. "What are you planning?" "Nothing." "You're going to move the money." I didn't answer. "Sarah?" "Good night, Mom." She stepped closer. "You wouldn't do that to your family?" I looked at her, and for the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid of disappointing her. "I think you already did it to yourself." I went inside, locked the door, and sat on the floor. My hands were shaking, not because I was scared, because I had finally said no, not the kind of no that could be negotiated, not the kind of no that came with an apology, a real no, the kind that changed the relationship forever. The next morning, I woke up at 5:41. I had barely slept. I made coffee, opened my laptop, and started reading everything Daniel had sent me. There were documents, instructions, questions, warnings. The most important one was simple. Do not make rushed financial decisions under emotional pressure. I stared at that sentence for a long time. Then I realized something. I wasn't rushing. I had been preparing for this moment for 11 years. The money was the result of 11 years of preparation. The only thing that had happened suddenly was my family's attempt to claim it. At 8:30, I went to the bank. I brought identification, my account documents, the written record of the unauthorized change, and Daniel's contact information. I asked to speak with someone in account management. The manager took me into a private office. We went through everything. She confirmed the account had been modified. She confirmed Emily's access. She confirmed my mother had initiated the change under her previous authorization. Then she asked, "What would you like to do?" I looked at her. "I want to close the account." She nodded. "Because of the joint ownership?" "Yes." "And where would you like the funds transferred?" I gave her the instructions I'd prepared with professional advice. Not another account my family knew about. Not a shared account. Not something my mother could access. A legitimate private structure established under my own ownership and for my own long-term financial goals. The manager began processing the request. Then she paused. "Ms. Jenkins, because of the recent ownership change, there may be additional verification." "I understand." She stepped out. I waited. 5 minutes, 10, 15. My phone vibrated. "Emily, Mom says you're at the bank." I didn't respond. Another message. "Please don't do anything stupid." Then, "We can work something out." Then, "Sarah, seriously." I put my phone face down. The manager returned. "We can proceed." My heart started pounding. She explained the steps. I signed, verified, signed again. Then the transaction was initiated. I watched the screen. The number disappeared. $149,998.84. For 1 second, I felt sick. It wasn't gone. It was moving. Moving somewhere they couldn't casually reach. Somewhere that belonged to me. The process took time. That was the hardest part. Because every minute felt like a door left unlocked. I sat there until the transfer was confirmed. Then I looked at the new account structure. The balance was there. Safe. Under my sole control. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt exhausted. Like I had just survived a fire. My phone buzzed again. This time it was Mom. I answered. She didn't say hello. "Where's the money?" I closed my eyes. "It belongs to me." "Where is it?" "Safe. You had no right to move it." I almost laughed. "No right?" "You're deliberately hurting your sister." "No. You know she needs that money." "She needs her own money." "Sarah, you added her to my account without permission." "She wasn't going to take it." "Then why did you add her?" Silence. I waited. Finally she said, "Because you weren't listening." There it was again. The truth. She hadn't done it because of an emergency. She had done it because I said no. I said, "So this was punishment?" "No." "Yes." "I was trying to teach you responsibility." I laughed. "You added my sister to my savings account to teach me responsibility?" "You're being disrespectful." "Mom, I'm 32 years old." "You're still my daughter." "And you're still my mother." Silence. Then I said, "But you're not my financial manager." She hung up. I sat in my car and cried. Not because I regretted moving the money, because I realized how badly I had wanted her approval. All those years, every overtime shift, every sacrifice, every time I said no to myself. A tiny part of me had always imagined that one day she'd look at me and say, "I'm proud of you." Instead, she had looked at $150,000 and thought, "How can we use that?" That hurt more than I expected. 2 hours later, Emily called. I didn't answer. She left a voicemail. Her voice was trembling. Sarah, I don't know what Mom told you, but I'm not trying to steal from you. I listened. I just thought you were going to help us. Pause. Mom said you would. Another pause. I know you think I'm lazy. I stared at the phone. I know you think I don't work hard. Her voice cracked. But you don't know what it's like being me. I almost deleted the voicemail. Instead, I listened to the rest. I thought you were my sister. Then it ended. For the first time, I felt something other than anger. Sadness. Because Emily actually believed the story Mom had told her. That my money was available. That I was obligated to share it. That saying no made me cruel. I called her. She answered immediately. Sarah, I'm here. Where's the money? I took a breath. Safe. Did you move all of it? Yes. She started crying. I knew you hated me. I don't hate you. You do. I hate what happened. Mom said you were going to help. Mom told you that? Yes. Did you ever ask me? Silence. No. Why? Because Mom said you would say no. I closed my eyes. That was the entire story. Emily hadn't even asked me. She had gone through Mom. Mom had decided my answer didn't matter. And Emily had accepted that. I said quietly, Emily, that's the problem. What? Nobody asked me. She didn't answer. You both decided what I would do with my money before I even got a choice. I didn't think. I know. She cried harder. I really am struggling. I believe you. Then why won't you help? Because helping you doesn't mean giving you access to my savings. I don't need all of it. I know. Then, I'll help you find other options. She went quiet. I'll help you make a budget. I'll help you look for work. I'll even help with a small emergency expense if it's something I can afford and if I choose to. So you're not giving me money? No. She started crying again, but this time I didn't feel guilty. I felt relieved. Because I finally understood, helping someone and allowing them to control you are two completely different things. That evening, Mom called again. I didn't answer. Then came the messages. You're destroying this family. Your sister is devastated. You always have to be in control. One day you'll need us. I read every message. Then I blocked her. I blocked Emily too. Not forever. Just long enough to breathe. The next morning, something unexpected happened. My bank contacted me. They told me the account had been fully closed and the ownership change was being documented as part of the internal review. I had the money. I had the records. And most importantly, I had control. But there was one final problem. My mother still had the old authorization documents. Daniel advised me to formally revoke every prior authorization, update all beneficiary and emergency contact information, and ensure that no family member retained access to my financial information. I did all of it, one by one, click by click, signature by signature. It was strangely satisfying, not dramatic, not cinematic, just paperwork. But after years of being told I had no right to control my own money, every signature felt like reclaiming a piece of myself. Then I received an email from Mom. She had sent it from another address. The subject line was, "Please read this before it's too late." I opened it. She wrote about family, about forgiveness, about how money changes people, about how she had only wanted to protect Emily. And then, at the bottom, she wrote, "Your grandmother would be ashamed of how you're behaving." I stared at the screen. My grandmother. The one person in my family who had always understood me. She had died when I was 26. And suddenly, I remembered something she once told me. We were sitting on her porch. I had been complaining about working too much. She had squeezed my hand. Sarah. Never confuse being needed with being loved. I hadn't understood it then. I understood it now. I closed the email and didn't reply. For the next several weeks, I heard almost nothing from my family. At first, that silence felt strange, then peaceful. I went to work. I exercised. I cooked. I slept. I started looking seriously at houses. For the first time, I wasn't saving for some imaginary future. I was building it. 3 months later, I found a small house. It wasn't impressive. 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, a tiny backyard, old hardwood floors, a kitchen that needed work. The paint was ugly. The front steps creaked. I loved it immediately. I put in an offer. It was accepted. When I signed the paperwork, my hand shook. Not because of the price, because of what it represented. Nobody had given it to me. Nobody had rescued me. Nobody had approved it. I had done it. A month after moving in, I planted a small tree in the backyard. I stood there with dirt under my fingernails. The sun was setting. And I realized I hadn't thought about Emily all day. That felt like freedom. Then, one Saturday morning, someone knocked on my door. I opened it. Emily. She looked different, tired, thinner, more serious. I didn't invite her in. She stood on the porch. Can we talk? I hesitated, then nodded. She looked past me. Is this your house? Yes. It's nice. Thank you. She smiled faintly. I guess you really did it. I guess I did. She looked down. Mom's still angry. I figured. She says you're selfish. I know. She also says you manipulated the situation. I didn't. I know. That surprised me. I leaned against the doorframe. What happened? Emily took a breath. I got a job. I smiled slightly. That's good. It's not glamorous. Doesn't have to be. I've been working for 6 weeks. That's really good. She nodded. Then she said, I've been thinking about what you said. Which part? That nobody asked you. I didn't say anything. She continued. I should have. Yes. I should have called you. Yes. I shouldn't have assumed you owed me. No. She looked at me. I was jealous. That one hurt. But you had everything together. I shook my head. No, I didn't. You look like you did. That's different. She laughed quietly. I thought you were judging me. I was. She looked surprised. I did judge you. I took a breath. Because I was angry. You kept quitting jobs. You kept borrowing money. You kept making Mom clean up your problems. And then everyone acted like I was cruel for refusing to do the same. She nodded slowly. I understand. I don't expect you to. I do. There was a long silence. Then she said, I'm sorry. Those words were harder to hear than I expected. Because for years I had imagined them, but now that they were standing in front of me, they didn't magically erase anything. I nodded. Thank you. She looked at the house again. Are you happy? I thought about it. Yes. She smiled. Good. Then she walked away. I watched her get into her car. I didn't know whether we'd ever be close again. Maybe we wouldn't. But for the first time, I wasn't trying to force the relationship back into the shape it had been. I was letting it become whatever it was supposed to become. 2 weeks later, Mom called. I almost ignored it. But something made me answer. Hello? She was quiet. Then, I've been thinking. I smiled faintly. That sounds dangerous. She laughed. It was the first time we'd laughed together in months. Then she said, I was wrong. I closed my eyes. There it was. 3 words I never thought I'd hear. You were. I thought because you're my daughter, I could make decisions for you. You did. I thought Emily deserved what you had. She didn't. I know. Her voice cracked. I don't know when I became this person. I didn't answer. She continued. I was so afraid Emily would fail that I kept rescuing her. And me? You didn't need rescuing. I looked around my little house. No, I think I punished you for that. That sentence stayed with me. I didn't forgive her immediately. I didn't tell her everything was fine. I didn't pretend the last few months hadn't happened. I simply said, I'm glad you understand. She cried. So did I. But neither of us said anything else. Over the following year, our relationship slowly changed. Mom stopped asking about my money. She stopped treating my boundaries as insults. Emily kept working. She eventually moved into a cheaper apartment. Mark went back to work. They weren't suddenly wealthy. They weren't magically successful. But they started taking responsibility. And I kept my savings private. I never told them exactly where the money was. I never told them how the holding structure was arranged. I never gave anyone access again. Not because I was paranoid. Because I had learned. Trust doesn't mean giving people unrestricted access to what you've spent your life building. Love doesn't require surrender. Family doesn't automatically equal entitlement. And saying no doesn't make you selfish. Sometimes saying no is the most honest thing you can do for everyone involved. A year after the incident, I sat in my backyard beneath the tree I'd planted. It had grown taller than I expected. I had a cup of coffee in my hands. The house was quiet. My phone was beside me. I opened my banking app. I saw the balance. Still there. Still mine. But strangely, I didn't feel the rush I expected. The money wasn't the victory. That was the part I hadn't understood when I was 21. I thought the goal was $150,000. Then I thought the goal was buying a house. Then I thought the goal was protecting the money from my family. But none of those were the real victory. The real victory was finally understanding that I didn't need permission to protect myself. For years, my family had trained me to believe that being a good daughter meant being available. Being a good sister meant sacrificing. Being responsible meant cleaning up other people's mistakes. And being loved meant proving that I would give everything away if someone asked. I don't believe that anymore. The day my mother added Emily to my account, I felt powerless. 48 hours later, I had taken that power back. Not by screaming, not by humiliating anyone, not by destroying their lives. I simply closed the door they had assumed would always remain open. And maybe that's why it bothered them so much. They had never expected me to leave. They had never expected me to say no. They had never expected me to understand that I was allowed to choose myself. Sometimes revenge isn't watching someone suffer. Sometimes revenge is watching them realize they no longer have access to you. And that was exactly what happened. My mother didn't lose $150,000. Emily didn't lose $75,000. Because neither of them ever owned a single dollar of it. What they lost was something they had taken for granted for years. Access. Access to my time. Access to my guilt. Access to my sense of obligation. Access to the version of Sarah who always said yes. That Sarah was gone. And I wasn't bringing her back. Looking back, I don't think the most important moment was when I transferred the money. It was the moment I realized that I had been waiting my entire life for someone in my family to give me permission to protect myself. I didn't need it. I never did. The $150,000 was just money. What I actually saved was my independence, my future, my ability to make decisions without being punished for them. And if there's one thing I've learned, it's this. When people become accustomed to your sacrifice, your boundaries will feel like betrayal to them. That doesn't mean your boundaries are wrong. Sometimes the person who calls you selfish is simply someone who benefited from you never saying no. And sometimes the most satisfying revenge isn't taking something from someone. It's refusing to let them take anything else from you. If you've ever had someone treat your hard work like it automatically belonged to them, you probably understand why this story hit so differently. If you enjoyed this story, leave a comment and tell me. Would you have handled the situation the same way Sarah did? And if you want more stories about betrayal, family drama, and the moment people finally decide they've had enough, subscribe. Because sometimes justice doesn't arrive with an explosion. Sometimes it arrives quietly, with a closed account, a locked door, and a simple sentence. No, this belongs to me.